So please welcome Poet Laureate James Tokley.
You can clap again. I was very, very excited and impressed to hear the gentleman who preceded me talk about the platforms, etc., that he was talking about, because, you see, we are familiar with much of what he said. He calls it technology. We call it poetry. And with poetry, we have been able to teleport. We have been able to go to places where, up until Avatar was a movie, few people could imagine. Does this look strange? I don't know. It's like I've got an antenna coming out of my head or something. I wanted to talk to you briefly, because I believe that's all the time I have, about what it is like. Yeah, it wants to go. About what it is like to be a poet laureate. You can take that. You can just take that. Call it Poet Laureate me. I happen to be the first official Poet Laureate for the City of Tampa in the history of the City of Tampa. Thank you. And I wish that you could be with me from time to time when I introduce myself. I recall my first introduction of self as Poet Laureate. And I was talking with an individual who was talking with a local politician. I say local, he came back and forth to Tampa to Tallahassee, et cetera, et cetera. And he introduced me to this individual, and he said, yes, he is a Poet Laureate. And the fellow looked at me and said, well, that's nice. How long have you been in public works? And I say, yeah. You know, when people do that, you want to kick him, but you don't. And so that's number one. Number two, I recall when I introduced myself, and then the gentleman said, well, what do you do? Or I said, well, I'm the Poet Laureate. And he says, well, that's fine, but how do you make a living? And with my soberest aplomb, I looked at him and said, I beg your pardon. How do you make a living? And he told me what he did. He said, well, I'm a lawyer. So I left him alone. First of all, what is poetry? When we talk about poetry, we are talking about that which was, if you would allow me to say, that which was certainly one of the most primordial professions humanity has ever had. We can only imagine the first poet being out either on a hunt or planting seed, and for whatever reason deciding that he had or she had something to say to self or God, and in whatever language could have been reconnoitered, and the first poem was born. From King David to Tupac Shakur. The democratization of self-expression. We call it poetry. All you need is a pen and a piece of paper, and you can speak to God. That is what poetry is all about. Robert Frost said that poetry is that which takes you by the throat. McLeish says that poetry should not mean, it should be. I say poetry is that one secret that every one of us has. And every now and then, either with meter and definitely with metaphor. We speak not only to ourselves, but we speak to our neighbors, we speak to our cities, we speak to our nations, we speak to our planet, we speak to our God, we speak to our universe, and as poets we say, I am, and this is how I see me and the universe. As one individual said, Terentius Afra, 500 years ago, he said, as I am human, all things human are common unto me. Whenever we write, whenever a poet picks up pen or goes to the console to write, he or she says that. How did I get to be this? I think the lady said, I got 10 minutes. Is that 10 minutes or 10 seconds? All right. My grandfather told me that wherever you go, you have to find a niche and fill it. You see what is needed wherever you are, and if you can supply it, do so. When I came to Tampa in 1978, my father's home, I saw that Tampa did not have a Poet Laureate, and I wanted to be that which Tampa did not have. So I worked with Mayor Dick Greco in his campaign. He was successful, and I had a good friend who went to Mayor Greco after he was elected for the third time, and said to him, there's a fellow by the name of James Tokley, and he would like to read a poem for you. He'd like to be in your inaugural thing. And Mayor Greco said, well, we've already got some black people. And he says, it's just we got a choir. He says, well, no, he's not going to sing, and he can't dance. So, but he's going to read a poem. And by the way, I love Mayor Greco, and he loves me. He's like a father to me. I should say that. And he allowed me to read A New Day Dawns. And after I read it, he did a very strange thing. He wept. He went to the microphone. Really, he frightened me. I thought that I'd said something that made him angry. He was going to kill me. And he said to the crowd, he said, if I could write poetry like that, I wouldn't need to be the mayor. And he said it twice. The news reporters didn't report it, but we all heard it. And it began from there. You see, because what we know is this. Yes, nuclear mechanisms are horrendous, but nothing yet has been mightier than the pen. Not the sword, but the pen. I don't have much time left, but I'm going to read one of my pieces. It is a piece that was said to be the largest poem ever posted in the history of the world. And it was on the side of the Tampa Towers. It was 74 feet high, 74 feet high and 45 feet wide. And it was called Leviathan. And if I can find it, I will read it for you. And then I will thank you for allowing me to be part of this futuristic endeavor. You know, I'm waiting for the day when whatever spaceship goes to the moon or Mars or whatever, when they wake the astronauts up or the cosmonauts up, they wake them up with a poem. Huh? Yeah, you can applaud. Leviathan, on a cool Saturday morning, January 7th, 2005, Tampa briefly became the home for the largest poem ever posted in the history of the world literature. At 65 feet high, 43 feet wide, it hung on the side of the Park Tower building on Tampa Street across from Likes Park. And it begins as such. The first words that earth heard were mine. I taught seagulls how to sing. Before God fashioned humankind or the land of Eden, I was king. The mighty shark makes way for me, and the squid with her 1,000 arms surveys my kingdom cautiously, for fear that I may do her harm. But I am David of the sea, a bard with baleen dithyramb. 'Twas Homer learned his trade from me, whose epic poems predated man. And yet, within my verse resides the secret lore that Plato knew, the place where great Atlantis lies in all its splendor, crusted through. I am Leviathan, sleek and black, the racing porpoise, Pelorus Jack, the throat that swallowed wise men whole, the bone that broke Nantucket's soul, the nightmare that poor Ahab knew, the harpoon mark that scars the blue of a breast filled up with mother's milk and spills vermilion on the silk. I am the whale whose spiraled horn protruded from its bulbous brow, portrayed him as a unicorn, a tale hard put to disavow. And whales who would the will to fly on winged fingers over the sea, their full sopranos pierce the sky with siren songs that sing to me. For I am Gaia's other child, who tends her flock with a tender sweep, who smiles for you his monstrous smile and sings his verse from the briny deep. Thank you.
Would you grace us with one more?
I did. He was tall and black and sinewy, and I was small and short and pudgy. Need I say more? It's called The Pursuit, and I shall read it quickly. My mother was an angel with a sweet angelic grin and wore the dimple of a goddess in the center of her chin. Oh, how I loved her and adored her as she wore her fur-lined coats. When she came home from Philadelphia like a sweet, exotic note from a foreign song, an instrument I never before had heard, a strange and vibrant melody, a warm, embracing word. That was my mother before he came and took her by degrees and sucked from her the sap of life as winter does the trees. I swore I'd get him when I grew to manhood, hunt him down and cut him sure with a razor that my uncle kept, the one he bought from a hardware store. I tell this tale as a full-grown man, so follow me as best you can. For 30 years I stalked him through the thickets and the vines, through the eyes of aged women whom his kiss had rendered blind. I chased him through a lyric once, of a rhyme not read aloud, and I got close enough to hear a poet screaming, "Be not proud!" But he escaped me and my razor, for I swore to cut him sure, just as clean as any man could run a razor to the core. And I chased him through the pages of 1,000 reveries, of the people through the ages he had done as he did me, and yet he mocked me as he left me stark mementos of his trade in the smiles of aged women where young laughter once had played. Ah, you lean, lascivious demon, you who revels in his crime and who plucks up little children like brown berries on the vine and who stiffens knuckles, hips, and fingers, elbow joints, and knees till they molder in their sockets like the sprockets of a tree. 'Tis him I followed halfway round the globe and swore myself to cut. If I could catch him once in a young woman's arms, I'd slice his filthy luck. And all the while my mother's beaming youth, my memory's eye could see, and how he stripped her down, abused her, and then took her fast from me, and how he squeezed her as he would an orange, and left the cancerous skin and a smile that only smiled forlorn to trace where life had been. I thought of that and picked up on his trail like leather-stocking wood, or Chingachgook of the Delaware tribe, that native Robin Hood. I tracked him down around the ancient wharves of Whitman's Brooklyn rhymes and ran his shadow through Jane Austen's house and Bronte's vineyard vines, and would have nabbed him at Anne Sexton's house, which glistened with her blood that was shed but for the spite of him in Sapphic sisterhood. Oh, spill the words of pen and write in red the color of despair, and dip my razor in that ink to scrawl its anger bare. And so I traced him to a nursing home, whose habitants I knew, for I had an aunt who lived there in her cluttered quietude, and as I crept in, I could smell him, his melancholy rhyme, that revolting stench of romance with its sweet and sickly lines, and my razor started grinning like a serpent at my arm, like a cold and cruel assassin who had come to do great harm, and like a leopard through the doorway I did fling my weight into a rather self-conceited poker game that my aunt was sitting through, and she looked up to see me standing there and gave a curious smile, for there was blood smeared on the playing cards, and the small room reeked of bile. Each player had a butcher knife that lay beside her deck, and my enemy dozed in an overstuffed chair with gashes on his neck. And in that instant, all my wrath was but a snowflake in the sun, as I stared meek and speechless at what each of them had done. But Auntie took it with a shrug and smiled. "Oh, never mind. You didn't interrupt a thing. We were just killing time."
Thank you so much.